Design Well Podcast, Episode 1. The pilot episode because, Episode 1's always called pilot for some reason. And I don't even know if I call this a podcast, it's more like a webcast, YouTube cast, talking thing that I want to do. So, Design Wall is going to be something where I talk about the design and maybe mechanics behind video games. Now, I'm not going to be talking about the big features that you'll see somewhere like a review site or on the forums that everyone's talking about or complaining about. I'm gonna try and stick to the little things about games, the small design choices that were made by companies to affect their game, and do affect their game quite a bit. Later on I might be talking about news and stuff, but for the first at least 4 episodes, there will be no news. So, first game I am going to discuss is Halo Reach. Okay? I'm going to be talking about a multiplayer map in that, and that map is Countdown. Countdown's the one from the campaign where the rocket ship goes off and goes flies off. Well, Countdown takes place in that area where it started, and pretty much, if you know Halo Reach, you probably know Countdown. It's red, blue, 3 levels kind of thing, air vents going up. And if I were to ask you if Countdown was symmetrical or not, you would say symmetrical right away. And that's not wrong. Countdown is a symmetrical map, and there's no dispute in that. It is mirrored on both sides. But the thing is that when you're playing a Team Slayer match, it's not really symmetrical. Even though it is mirrored, but it doesn't play symmetrically in a Team Slayer match. That's because Team Slayer matches are top versus bottom, not side versus side. Like, yes, red team will spawn on their side, blue team will spawn on their side, but very shortly after that happens, it turns into a top versus bottom game. Someone's always trying to hold the top, always trying to hold the high ground, and the other team is trying to get to that high ground because it's good to hold high ground. You always hear people say, we got to hold the high ground. There is reasons for that, and that's what happens. So that symmetrical map plays very asymmetrically on Team Slayer. Now, on games like Capture the Flag and Assault, it plays very symmetrically like it looks, because the flag and bomb are in the bases where you spawn, and you don't really want to hold the top because then no one's there to defend your base. So that happens a lot in Capture Flag and Assault, where it plays very symmetrically, and the top is actually not used all that much. Yes, it is used, but not to the extent that a Team Slayer match would be. So I just thought it's kind of interesting how very symmetrical map plays asymmetrically, and that's almost like Halo 3's Construct. That map was kind of the same. Countdown seems like a spiritual successor to this map, in that there was a few levels, top versus bottom, some grav lifts or air vents going up, and Construct wasn't completely symmetrical, but it was pretty darn close. And I don't know, to me it feels like it plays very similar to that game type. Moving on from Halo, I am going to talk about just symmetrical maps and asymmetrical maps in general now, and just in other games. Most games I see nowadays, they have pretty much all asymmetrical maps, and I don't think I can think of a game that doesn't have an asymmetrical multiplayer map. Most multiplayer maps in most games are all asymmetrical. Even Halo, they have a lot of asymmetrical maps, even though the big popular maps are usually the symmetrical ones. Now, with asymmetrical maps, there's a little bit of quirk there, because in real life you get asymmetrical environments. Chances are you're not going to be in a neighborhood or in a mall that has debris falling, where the debris falls perfectly in line, or the neighborhood was designed to be exactly the same on both sides, kind of thing. That just doesn't happen in real life. You don't get those kind of fluke events, or not even fluke. Someone have to design that purposely. That doesn't happen from what I've seen. And with asymmetrical maps, often you get slightly imbalanced gameplay because someone will spawn, have a better spawn than you, and they'll have more cover, they'll have a better line of sight, or anything like that, and it slightly throws it off, and all of a sudden, it's not so much about skill, it's about luck of the spawn. Now, there is a way around this, actually, to have symmetrical maps and still look very asymmetrically realistic. Gears of War 3 did an amazing job with that on their map, Old Town. If you ever played Gears 3, Old Town was the one that was right on the shoreline, had a beach. There was a little market area in the middle with a whole bunch of pumpkins and stuff you could shoot. Anyways, on one side of the map, okay, first of all, I should say Old Town is not completely symmetrical. There is an elevation change, you know, from one side to the other, but for the most part, it's symmetrical, and for the purposes of this conversation, we're going to just call it symmetrical. Because all the cover was lined up symmetrically, all the runs to the guns, you know, line of sights were symmetrical. Well, top may have had a better line of sight a bit, but the point is that it was symmetrical, and it had asymmetrical static meshes, or the physical models you see in the game, like buildings and people and stuff, right? On one side, you had a whole bunch of buildings kind of blocking you from getting out of the map. On the other side, you had a beach with the ocean, which you couldn't swim in, so it was like an invisible wall stopping you from getting outside the map, which was great because it made it look very realistic. It wasn't just like a square building area they're just covered with skyscrapers or anything. It was what you'd see in real life, you know, buildings leading down to the shore, and that's probably why it was kind of slanted, just because it was slightly more realistic that way. And they did a great job of that. You know, that's a very good thing to do, have different models, different static meshes, and still have a symmetrical map. Plays the same symmetrical maps and looks the same as asymmetrical maps. You know, win-win kind of thing. But with that doesn't happen all the time. Often you'll see maps like in Call of Duty. I'm not trying to rag on Call of Duty. They're just a prime example of this. You see maps in there where it's just like a neighborhood or like a section of buildings, and it's very much asymmetrical, right? And with asymmetrical maps, like I said, you get that little bit of imbalance, luck of the spawn thing. But if you really like hard set on asymmetrical map, everything's asymmetrical, you really want to make the center of the map as symmetrical as possible. You can have the outsides of the map symmetrical, but you want that center part symmetrical, because this is where most of the battling happens. This is where everyone's fighting for. It's that line that's being pushed back and forth kind of thing. And you want that to be as skill-based as possible and not as luck of the spawn-based as possible. And you're allowed to have these bases on either side asymmetrical, because even on this map, which is symmetrical, you know, believe that is symmetrical, if blue team pushes onto red team's base, you can see that blue team is at a slight disadvantage here. This guy's got cover or is elevated or whatever the hell this box is, right? But that's, you know, he chose to go and attack that base, and if red team attacked blue base, they'd be in the same red team would have the same problem of a slight disadvantage. That's because it's your base; it should be easier to defend, kind of thing. But you really want that center part to be symmetrical. That's where most of the battling happens, and you want the entrances and cover and line of sight to be very symmetrical and balanced in that part. Obviously, you want the bases on either side of an asymmetrical map. You want both bases to be even. You don't need to be symmetrical, but even, you know, balanced very well. And that happens a lot in Call of Duty games. The bases are balanced quite well, I find. But, yeah, you just want them even, at least. And some of you might be thinking, well, there are very asymmetrical maps which do very well, right? And why is this if there's that imbalance in power kind of thing? Well, I'll suggest a map here, Halo 3's Guardian. You know, everyone wanted to defend the snipe tower. That's where people always held up. That's where they always brought the oddball. That's where they always tried to lock down the map. And for good reasons. That had you could see pretty much the entire map from there if you had a good setup. You could hit a lot of the map from there with your battle rifles or something. But even though it had all those good features in it, it was not that easy to defend. It feels like it should be, but it wasn't. From couple reasons. One of them being that I see there as being 4.5 ways into Guardian. There was elbow, there was the man cannon, there was bottom middle, and there was top middle. And then top middle you could also jump off or jump onto snipe 3, which I'm counting as a half because you took the top middle lane for most of the way. So there's about 4.5 ways into there, and only 4 people, right? So you couldn't defend every way perfectly. You could defend them all reasonably well. You couldn't defend every way perfectly, though. And another reason why I think Guardian worked so well as an asymmetrical map was because if you were defending that snipe tower, you were very cramped in that area, right? So if someone was coming up from elbow, let's just assume this is elbow. Someone's coming up from elbow, and this front red guy is either strafing back and forth or just standing there. The back red guy is going to have a very hard time getting a clear shot on blue. He might hit his own buddy. He might get a couple shots off on blue, maybe, you know, or obviously he can throw grenades and stuff, but just he has a very hard time hitting the blue guy when it's like that. It's very cramped, and so the attackers won't get team shot as much. You're attacking the base, you know, I can get shot from 4 people from 4 different directions all at once, which does happen on several maps in Halo. And Guardian, it doesn't happen on that, which is great, and you can attack that base reasonably well. Another reason, maybe just a little one, that because it was so cramped, grenades were very effective being thrown into Snipe 2. You put one right in the middle there, you hit pretty much everything in Snipe 2. They'd have to leave that area, scattering them a bit and letting you get a foothold in their base. So that was very well designed. People couldn't team shot you as well. There were a lot of ways in to change up your strategies. There was a way to clear out part of the base. But the advantages to holding Snipe Tower, you have a huge line of sight. Very nice setups on that for that one. Like, that's the best setup in the map, I believe. That's going to do it for this episode. Hope it's not too long. I've already done YouTube videos before. But if you want to reach me for any features, questions, games, things you want me to cover, email is designwallpodcast@gmail.com. If you want to get the actual podcast version of this, you can get it on the websites designwallpodcast.wordpress and .libsyn.com. Those obviously don't have any colorful, fancy, awesome pictures. You can also get it on iTunes. They're up there. So I will see you guys for the next episode.